Welcome and thank you. Your presence keeps us motivated. Quick question, what part of the globe are you tuning in from? Whether it's morning or night where you are, let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mask of Normalcy. Russell Norwood was not a man who tolerated deception. In the high-stakes world of private equity where he'd made his fortune, he developed a reputation for brutal efficiency and an almost supernatural ability to detect lies. His colleagues called him the bloodhound behind his back, a nickname he secretly enjoyed. At 42, Russell had everything most men dreamed of: a sprawling colonial home in an exclusive neighborhood, a portfolio worth 8 figures, and what he had believed to be a loving wife of 7 years. Vanessa had been a paralegal when they met, intelligent and ambitious with a sharp wit that had drawn him in immediately. "You know what I find refreshing about you, Russell," she had said on their third date, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "You don't pretend to be nice." He'd laughed then. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "Absolutely," she'd replied with that enigmatic smile. "Nice is boring. Nice is predictable. You're authentic." That conversation had sealed their fate. 6 months later, they were married in a lavish ceremony that made the society pages. Russell remembered how Dorothy, Vanessa's mother, had watched him throughout the reception with thinly veiled suspicion. She'd cornered him by the bar, her diamonds catching the light as she leaned in close. "My daughter could have had anyone," she'd whispered, her breath heavy with champagne. "Just remember that." Russell had simply smiled and walked away. Dorothy Perkins was old Boston money with nothing left but the name. He knew she'd hoped Vanessa would marry into a family with lineage rather than a self-made man with new money and no pedigree. For years, the marriage had been good, or so Russell had thought. Vanessa managed their social calendar with precision while he built his firm from a boutique agency into a powerhouse. They traveled extensively, maintained the right friendships, and if they hadn't had children yet, well, they had agreed that careers came first. The first crack appeared 3 years ago when Dorothy's investment advisor ran off with most of her fortune. Rather than allow his mother-in-law to face public humiliation, Russell had quietly paid off her debts and moved her into their guest house. Vanessa had been grateful, effusively so, but something shifted after Dorothy's arrival. "You work too much," Vanessa began saying. The sex dwindled. The conversations shortened. Dorothy's presence became a constant, her influence over Vanessa growing by the day. 8 months ago, Vanessa had approached him with an idea. "Mom and I want to start a small business," she'd said over dinner. "Just crafts, really. Artisanal soaps, candles, that sort of thing. We could use the home office since you're hardly ever there." Russell had agreed, seeing it as an opportunity for Vanessa to occupy herself and perhaps loosen Dorothy's grip. He'd even helped them set up a limited liability company, Perkins Artisanal Goods, and had his accountant show them the basics of business finance. Looking back, he should have seen the signs. The late-night inventory sessions, the steady stream of packages, the new friends Vanessa never introduced him to, the hushed phone calls that ended when he entered a room. But he'd been distracted by the Harrington acquisition, a complex deal that had consumed him for months. By the time he started paying attention to what was happening in his own home, the foundation was already crumbling beneath his feet. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Russell had received a text from a block number while in a board meeting. "Your house is being watched." Not by us. There was no signature, no explanation. Just those 8 words that sent ice through his veins. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. The anonymous text message nagged at Russell as he left his office early, breaking his usual pattern of working until 8. He drove home with a growing sense of unease, taking a circuitous route and checking his rearview mirror frequently. Old habits from his early days when he navigated the sharky waters of venture capital with competitors watching his every move. As he approached his neighborhood, Russell pulled into the parking lot of a local coffee shop and called his head of security, Boyd Walton, a former FBI agent who now handled private contracts. "Boyd, I need surveillance on my house. Discreet, starting immediately. Problem at home, Russ?" Boyd's voice was carefully neutral. "Just a precaution. And I need you to pull records for all deliveries to my address for the past 6 months. Courier services, postal, everything." Will do. Anything else? Russell hesitated. Yes. I want to know who's watching my property. Someone's watching you? The professional neutrality in Boyd's voice slipped. That's what I need to confirm. Give me answers by tomorrow. Russell hung up and sat in his car for several minutes, thinking. Then he called his attorney, Philip Maddox. Phil, I need a favor off the books. Those are getting expensive. Russell, Philip replied, but his tone was light. I need you to prepare documentation transferring all my personal assets to the Cayman Shell. Backdated appropriately. A pause. That sounds like you're expecting trouble. Just a contingency. And Phil, I may need you to show up unannounced. If I text you 911 home, drop everything and come to my house with those papers. Russell, you're scaring me a little. What's going on? Hopefully nothing. But if it's something, I want to be prepared. Russell arrived home to find Vanessa and Dorothy in the kitchen, preparing dinner together. An unusual sight. They both startled when he walked in. You're home early, Vanessa said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Thought I'd surprise you. Russell kissed her cheek, noticing how she subtly pulled away. Something smells good. Coke au vin, Dorothy said, her hands fidgeting with her apron. Vanessa's been taking French cooking classes. This was news to Russell. Have you? Where? Just online, Vanessa replied quickly. Something to do while you're working. Russell nodded, watching them exchange glances. Mind if I check some emails in the office before dinner? Actually, Vanessa said, we have inventory spread out everywhere in there. It's a mess. Why don't you use the study instead? Sure. Russell smiled. No problem. He walked upstairs to the study, which overlooked the driveway, and watched as a dark sedan drove slowly past the house, then circled back and parked across the street. The windows were tinted, but he could make out the silhouette of someone watching the house. That night, after Vanessa fell asleep, Russell slipped out of bed and made his way to the home office. The door was locked, another recent change. Using the spare key he'd quietly made weeks earlier, he let himself in. The room had been transformed. What had once been his workspace now looked like a small factory. There were boxes of packaging materials, label makers, and various crafting supplies. But in the corner, partially hidden behind a folding screen, sat something that made his blood run cold. A professional-grade heat press and what appeared to be a specialized printer. Russell carefully photographed everything without disturbing the setup, then examined the labels on some of the boxes. They bore the logos of high-end designer brands. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Prada. A drawer in the desk contained sample tags and authenticity cards that looked indistinguishable from the real thing. His wife wasn't running a craft business. She was manufacturing counterfeit designer goods. As Russell was about to leave, his phone pinged with a message from Boyd. 2 watchers. 1 FBI commercial fraud division. 1 unknown, possibly organized crime connection. Call me ASAP. Russell quietly locked the office and returned to bed, lying awake beside his sleeping wife. The pieces were falling into place, and none of them formed a picture he wanted to see. The next morning, Russell received a detailed report from Boyd. The unknown watcher was connected to the Vitali crime family, specifically to their counterfeiting operations. The delivery records showed regular packages from China and Turkey, common sources for raw materials used in counterfeiting luxury goods. And most damning of all, there were regular cash deposits into a bank account under Perkins Artisanal Goods that totaled over $300,000 in the past 6 months. Russell maintained his routine, leaving for work at his usual time, but instead of going to his office, he met with Boyd and Philip at a hotel downtown. So my wife and mother-in-law are running a counterfeiting operation from my home office, Russell said flatly, staring out the window at the city skyline. And they've somehow gotten involved with the Vitali family. Philip whistled low. That's federal prison time, Russell. Trademark counterfeiting at this scale carries up to 10 years. The FBI surveillance suggests they're building a case, Boyd added. They typically observe for weeks before moving in. They're probably documenting the distribution network. Russell turned to them, his expression hardening. I need to know everything. Who they're working with, where the money's going, and most importantly, who else is involved. You think there's someone else? Philip asked. Russell's jaw tightened. Vanessa's smart, but she doesn't have the connections to set something like this up. Someone introduced her to this world. He didn't share his darkest suspicion, that his wife's sudden distance might be connected to more than just her criminal enterprise. But first, he needed proof. Boyd, I want surveillance on Vanessa when she leaves the house. And I want to know every person she meets with. Russell, Philip said cautiously, what exactly are you planning? Russell's face was a mask of cold determination. I'm planning to find out who's trying to set me up to take the fall. And then I'm going to make sure they regret it. Chapter 3. The Setup. Russell spent the next 3 days maintaining the illusion of normalcy while gathering intelligence. Boyd's team followed Vanessa to a series of meetings, including one with a man identified as Maxwell Lobo Wallace, a mid-level operative in the Vitali organization who specialized in distribution of counterfeit goods. More troubling was her meeting with a man Boyd couldn't immediately identify. Tall, well-dressed, driving a Maserati. They met at an upscale hotel bar in the financial district and, based on the surveillance photos, seemed intimately familiar with each other. Got a name for our mystery man, Boyd said, calling Russell while he was at lunch with clients. Anthony Keller. Goes by Tony. Former customs officer. Now works as a consultant for import businesses. Has connections to both legitimate luxury retailers and the black market. And his connection to my wife? Russell asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the growing knot in his stomach. Boyd hesitated. They checked into the hotel. Russell. Room was booked for 3 hours. Russell absorbed this information with a cold detachment that surprised even him. I see. Keep following the thread. That evening at home, Russell watched Vanessa move around the kitchen, noting how she checked her phone every few minutes. She seemed on edge, jumpy. Everything okay? He asked, sipping his bourbon. You seem distracted. Just busy with the business, she said, not meeting his eyes. We have a big order to fulfill this week. Anything I can help with? She looked up sharply. No. You have your work, I have mine. Fair enough. He paused. How about we go away this weekend? We haven't had time alone in months. I can't, she said quickly. Mom and I have a craft fair in Providence. Russell nodded, knowing there was no craft fair. According to Boyd, she had a meeting scheduled with Lobo Wallace to hand off a major shipment. Another time, then. That night, Russell received a text from an unknown number. Walk away from the heart deal, or your wife's activities become your problem. The heart deal was a sensitive acquisition Russell's firm was managing, a pharmaceutical company with promising patents. The threat confirmed his suspicion. Someone was using Vanessa's counterfeiting operation as leverage against him. The next morning, Russell kissed Vanessa goodbye, as usual, but instead of heading to work, he met with a former colleague who now worked for the DEA. I need to know if the FBI is planning to move on a counterfeiting operation, Russell explained, keeping details vague. It's related to the Hart acquisition. His contact made some calls. Word is they're moving tomorrow morning. Commercial Fraud Division, with support from local PD. Russell thanked him and immediately called Philip. Tomorrow's the day. Be ready. He spent the rest of the day preparing, transferring funds to secure accounts, and ensuring his contingency plans were in place. That evening, he made a show of telling Vanessa he had an early meeting the next day. I'll be gone before you're up, he said casually. That's fine, she replied, distracted by her phone. Mom and I have a lot of work to do anyway. Russell pretended to go to sleep early, but instead lay awake, listening as Vanessa slipped out of bed around midnight and went downstairs. He heard muffled conversation, then the sound of Dorothy's voice growing more heated. They were arguing about something. Morning came, and Russell left as promised but parked 2 blocks away, watching his house through binoculars. At precisely 8:47 a.m., 4 unmarked cars and 2 police cruisers converged on his property. He waited until the officers had entered before driving back and pulling into his driveway. As he stepped out of his car, he saw exactly what he'd expected. Officers carrying boxes of counterfeit goods out of his home office. What he hadn't expected was the look of rehearsed terror on Vanessa's face as she spotted him. She immediately pointed in his direction. He made me do it, she cried out, her voice carrying across the lawn. Russell forced us to run the operation. He threatened us. Dorothy stood beside her, nodding dramatically, wiping obviously fake tears from her eyes. He said he'd cut us off completely if we didn't help him, she added, her voice breaking. We were terrified. A detective approached Russell. Sir, I'm Detective Cooper with Boston PD. We have a warrant to search these premises for counterfeit goods and related materials. Understand, Russell said calmly. But I can assure you, Detective, this is the first I'm hearing about any counterfeiting operation in my home. That's a lie, Vanessa shouted. He coordinated everything. The suppliers, the distribution, it was all him. Detective Cooper gave Russell a hard look. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. As the detective reached for his handcuffs, a sleek black Audi pulled into the driveway, and Philip Maddox emerged, carrying a leather briefcase. Detective Cooper, Philip called out, striding confidently toward them. Philip Maddox, attorney for Mr. Norwood. I must insist you release my client immediately. Cooper frowned. Your client is implicated in a federal counterfeiting operation. Counselor. Is he? Philip opened his briefcase and removed a file. Then perhaps you can explain why Mr. Norwood has been in Zurich for the past 3 months, overseeing the European expansion of his firm. I have his passport, stamped entry and exit records, hotel receipts, and sworn statements from his business associates confirming his presence at daily meetings. Russell watched as Vanessa's face drained of color. Dorothy grabbed her daughter's arm for support. Furthermore, Philip continued, I have here documentation showing that Mr. Norwood transferred ownership of this property to his wife 6 months ago, retaining only minimal visitation rights during his brief returns to the States. He has had no access to or control over the home office where these alleged counterfeit goods were manufactured. Cooper examined the documents, his expression shifting from certainty to doubt. These appear to be in order, but we'll need to verify their authenticity. Of course, Philip agreed smoothly. In the meantime, unless you have evidence directly linking Mr. Norwood to these activities, evidence that would somehow contradict these legal documents and multiple witness statements, I suggest you focus your investigation elsewhere. Cooper conferred with another officer, then reluctantly nodded. Mr. Norwood, you're free to go for now, but don't leave town. We may have additional questions. As the officers continued their work, Russell turned to face Vanessa and Dorothy. His wife's expression had transformed from fake terror to genuine fear. Russell, she began, her voice shaking, I can't explain. Save it. He cut her off, his voice low and controlled. We both know what you try to do. Dorothy stepped forward, her previous tears now completely dry. Now, Russell, don't be hasty. This is all a misunderstanding. Is it Dorothy? Russell's smile was glacial. I think it's perfectly clear. The only misunderstanding was mine, believing you two had any loyalty or decency. He turned to Philip. I'd like to go now. As they walked to Philip's car, Russell heard Vanessa call his name, a note of desperation in her voice. He didn't look back. That went exactly as you predicted, Philip said once they were driving away. But you know they'll challenge those documents eventually. They're good forgeries, but they won't hold up to serious scrutiny. They don't need to, Russell replied, watching his house recede in the side mirror. They just need to buy me time. Time for what? Russell's expression hardened. Time to dismantle their entire operation and everyone connected to it, starting with Anthony Keller. Chapter 4, The Spider's Web. Russell established a command center in a penthouse suite at the Archer Hotel, paid for in cash under a different name. The room's dining table disappeared beneath laptops, financial records, and surveillance photos. Boyd had expanded his team to include a forensic accountant, a digital security expert, and 2 more field operatives. Your wife's been busy, the accountant, a severe woman named Diana, explained as she walked Russell through the financial trail. The counterfeiting operation grossed nearly $2 million in the past year, with money moving through 6 different shell companies before landing in offshore accounts. Russell studied the diagram she'd created. Those aren't Vanessa's accounts. She doesn't have the expertise to set this up. Correct, Diana confirmed. The beneficial owner appears to be Anthony Keller, though he's well insulated. Russell stared at the photo of Keller, handsome in a polished, artificial way, pinned to the evidence board. The man who'd been sleeping with his wife while using her to run his counterfeiting operation. The man who'd apparently decided Russell would make a convenient fall guy when the operation got too hot. What's Keller's endgame? Russell asked. Using my wife to manufacture counterfeits is one thing, but why try to frame me specifically? Boyd handed him a folder. We think it's connected to this. Inside was information about the Hart Pharmaceuticals acquisition that Russell's firm was managing. Hart had developed a promising new treatment for pancreatic cancer, and their patents alone were worth billions. Keller has connections to Meridian Biotech, Boyd explained. They're Hart's main competitor, and they've been trying to block the acquisition. The pieces clicked into place. So Keller was working two angles, Russell mused. Using my home for his counterfeiting operation while pressuring me to drop the Hart deal. Well, I didn't back off. He decided to eliminate you as a problem, Boyd finished. Russell's phone chimed with a text from Philip. Vanessa and Dorothy released pending further investigation. No charges filed yet. They're looking for you. Let them look, Russell muttered. Over the next few days, Russell immersed himself in understanding every aspect of Keller's operation. The man had constructed an impressive network. As a former customs officer, Keller had inside knowledge of how shipments were inspected and which officials could be bribed. He used that expertise to build a counterfeiting empire, importing raw materials and distributing finished products through a web of seemingly legitimate businesses. Vanessa's role had been ideal. A wealthy, respectable woman with no criminal record, whose husband's reputation and resources provided perfect cover. Dorothy, it turned out, had been the connection. Before her financial troubles, she dated a man connected to the Vitali family who had introduced her to Keller. The most disturbing discovery came when Boyd's digital expert, a former NSA contractor named Ellis, recovered deleted text from a cloud backup of Vanessa's phone. It's all arranged. Vanessa had written to Keller 3 months earlier. The FBI will find everything they need to connect Russell to the operation. Once he's arrested, I'll file for divorce, citing criminal activity, and take half of everything. Keller's response. And once the Hart deal collapses, Meridian stock will soar. We'll make millions on our options. Russell read the exchange multiple times, his expression unchanging. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. They've been planning this for months. There's more, Ellis said uncomfortably. The personal messages between them, they've been involved for over a year. Russell nodded, unsurprised. Show me everything. Ellis hesitated, then brought up a series of exchanges that left no doubt about the nature of Vanessa and Keller's relationship. Messages about their future together, about how Russell was too absorbed in his work to notice what was happening under his nose, about their plans for after his downfall. I almost feel bad for him, Vanessa had written. He trusted me completely. Don't waste sympathy, Keller had replied. He's collateral damage. Besides, he'll still have his reputation when we're done. Just not his fortune or his freedom. Russell's face betrayed nothing as he read their intimate exchanges, their cruel jokes at his expense, their detailed plans for his destruction. When he finished, he closed the laptop and stood up. I think we have everything we need, he said calmly. That night, alone in the hotel bedroom, Russell finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of Vanessa's betrayal. He'd given her everything, his name, his trust, his protection when her mother needed it. In return, she'd plotted his ruin while sharing another man's bed. For the first time since this began, Russell felt a white-hot rage building inside him. But by morning, that rage had cooled into something far more dangerous, absolute resolve. When Boyd arrived the next morning, he found Russell dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit, reviewing documents with methodical precision. You okay? Boyd asked. Russell looked up, his eyes clear and focused. I've never been better. Today we start dismantling Anthony Keller's life piece by piece. The FBI will move on him eventually, Boyd pointed out, once they finish processing the evidence from your house. The FBI moves too slowly, Russell interrupted, and they're constrained by laws and procedures. I'm not. Boyd studied him carefully. What exactly are you planning, Russell? Russell gestured to the whiteboard where he'd outlined a comprehensive strategy. First, we cut off his money, then his connections, then his protection. By the time I'm finished, Anthony Keller will have nothing and no one. And Vanessa? Boyd asked quietly. A cold smile touched Russell's lips. My wife made her choice. She'll learn what that choice costs. Chapter 5. Threads of Deception. Russell's first target was Keller's financial foundation. Through Diana's analysis, they identified the main revenue streams from the counterfeiting operation and the legitimate businesses Keller used as fronts. Chief among these was a high-end import company called Lux Verified, which supposedly authenticated luxury goods, but actually served as the primary distribution channel for the counterfeits. Keller owns 60% of Lux through a shell company, Diana explained. The remaining 40% is split between 3 silent partners. Their client list includes some major department stores and online retailers who believe they're getting genuine, authenticated goods. Russell studied the company structure. Who's the most vulnerable partner? Diana pointed to a name, Andrea Moretti. She provided initial capital, but isn't involved in operations. Her main business is real estate development. Perfect. Russell picked up his phone. Time to make a new friend. Through his extensive business network, Russell arranged an introduction to Andrea at a charity gala that weekend. She was an elegant woman in her 50s with a shrewd business mind. Russell approached her with a real estate opportunity, a distressed shopping center his firm had acquired in a portfolio liquidation. I've heard you work wonders with retail spaces, he said, after establishing rapport. This property has potential, but it needs the right vision. Andrea was intrigued, and they arranged to meet for lunch the following week. Over the next few days, Russell had Boyd's team assemble a comprehensive file on Lux Verified's actual operations, complete with documentation showing how the company was distributing counterfeits to unsuspecting retailers. At lunch, Russell waited until after their business discussion before casually mentioning, I understand you're an investor in Lux Verified. Andrea nodded, sipping her wine. A small stake. Anthony Keller manages most of it. Do you know Anthony? Not personally, Russell replied, but I've been learning a great deal about his operation recently. He slid a folder across the table. Andrea opened it, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock to alarm as she paged through the contents. This can't be right, she whispered. Every document in that file is authentic, Russell assured her. Lux is selling counterfeits to legitimate retailers. When this breaks, and it will break, everyone involved faces federal charges and civil lawsuits that will run into the millions. Andrea's face had gone pale. What do you want? 2 things. First, sell your stake in Lux to my holding company for $1, effective immediately. Second, introduce me to the other partners as someone interested in investing. Why would you want it on a business that's about to collapse? Russell smiled thinly. Let me worry about that. Do we have a deal, or would you prefer I take this information to the FBI? By the end of the week, Russell owned 40% of Lux Verified and had meetings scheduled with the remaining partners. Each received the same evidence and the same offer. By the following Friday, Russell controlled 100% of Keller's primary distribution channel without Keller knowing anything had changed. Simultaneously, Russell moved against Keller's relationship with the Vitali crime family. Through Boyd's connections, he arranged a meeting with Riccardo Vitali, the family's consigliere, at a secluded restaurant in the North End. Vitali was a thin, elegant man who looked more like an accountant than a mobster. He listened impassively as Russell laid out everything he knew about Keller's operation, including evidence that Keller was skimming profits that should have gone to the Vitali family. Mr. Keller has been using my home and my wife for his operation, Russell explained. He attempted to frame me when things got hot. I have no quarrel with your family, but I thought you should know exactly who you're dealing with. Vitali studied Russell with calculating eyes. Why come to me with this? You could go to the feds. The feds would shut down the entire operation. I'm only interested in Keller. Once he's removed, I believe we could establish a more equitable arrangement. You're proposing to take over Keller's position? Vitali seemed amused. I'm proposing a clean transition with better returns and less risk, Russell corrected. My network and resources far exceed Keller's. You'd find me a more valuable partner. Vitali leaned back. This is the man who's sleeping with your wife. Yes? And you want to do business with us? Business is business, Russell replied coldly. Personal matters are separate. Not in my experience, Vitali said. But I appreciate your directness. I'll consider what you've shared. Russell knew the seed had been planted. The Vitales wouldn't tolerate theft, and they'd be watching Keller closely now. One more pressure point applied. The third prong of Russell's attack targeted Keller's relationship with Meridian Biotech. Through careful manipulation of trading records and a series of anonymous tips to financial journalists, Russell created a paper trail suggesting Keller was engaged in insider trading related to the Hart acquisition. By the end of the second week, Keller's world was beginning to unravel, though he didn't yet realize the source. Lux Verified's operations were mysteriously disrupted by shipment problems and customs delays. His Vitali family contacts became suddenly distant, and a Wall Street Journal reporter started asking uncomfortable questions about his connection to Meridian Biotech. Throughout this period, Russell maintained complete radio silence with Vanessa, though he knew she was trying desperately to reach him. She'd left dozens of messages, each more frantic than the last, cycling through explanations, excuses, and finally threats. "You can't just disappear," her latest voicemail said. "We need to talk about what happens next. I've spoken to a divorce attorney. If you don't respond, I'll have no choice but to proceed with a filing that includes all your business irregularities." Russell played this message for Philip, who shook his head. "She's bluffing. She knows any investigation would uncover her own activities." "She's panicking," Russell corrected. "Keller's feeling the pressure, which means she is too." Boyd entered with fresh surveillance photos. Keller met with Vanessa today. It didn't look friendly. The photos showed Keller and Vanessa in his car, clearly arguing. In the final image, Vanessa was crying as Keller gripped her arm. Russell studied the photos dispassionately. He's realizing she's a liability now. Everything's proceeding exactly as planned. Philip looked concerned. "Russell, I understand your anger, but Vanessa could be in actual danger if Keller thinks she's a threat. Then she should have chosen her partners more carefully," Russell replied without emotion. Now it's time for Phase 2. Chapter 6, The Architect's Blueprint. 3 weeks after the police raid, Russell finally reached out to Vanessa via text. "We need to talk. Archer Hotel, Suite 1506, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone." When Vanessa arrived at the hotel suite, she found Russell sitting calmly at the dining table, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, looking as though their world hadn't imploded. The room was minimalist, but clearly expensive. "Russell," she breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "Have a seat, Vanessa." His tone was professionally courteous, as if addressing a business associate rather than his wife. She hesitated, then sat across from him. She looked thinner than he remembered, dark circles under her eyes, her usual impeccable appearance slightly frayed at the edges. "Where have you been?" she asked. "The police have been looking for you to ask more questions." "Have they?" Russell raised an eyebrow. "Strange that they haven't found me, considering I haven't left Boston." Vanessa fidgeted with her wedding ring. "Russell, about what happened?" "I can explain. It wasn't what it looked like." "Really?" Russell slid a folder across the table. "Because it looked like you were running a counterfeiting operation from our home while having an affair with Anthony Keller and plotting to frame me for federal crimes." Vanessa's face drained of color as she opened the folder to find printouts of her text exchanges with Keller. "How did you—" "That's not important," Russell interrupted. "What matters is that I know everything, Vanessa. Every detail of your relationship with Keller, every step of your plan to destroy me, every dollar you expected to gain from my downfall." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't my idea. Tony convinced me that you were going to leave me anyway. He said you had other women, that you were just waiting for the right time to cut me loose." Russell laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "And you believed him? After 7 years of marriage, you took the word of a con man over mine. You were never home." Vanessa's voice rose. "Always working, always distracted. Tony made me feel special, wanted, while plotting to send me to prison," Russell added flatly. "How romantic." Vanessa wiped away tears. "What do you want, Russell? Is this just to humiliate me before you file for divorce?" Russell leaned forward, his expression suddenly intense. I want you to understand exactly what's happening. Right now, Anthony Keller's life is collapsing around him. His business partners have abandoned him. His criminal associates suspect him of theft. Federal investigators are circling, and he believes you're the weak link. Fear flickered across Vanessa's face. What are you talking about? I'm dismantling everything Keller built, Russell explained calmly. Piece by piece, connection by connection. And I've made sure he'll believe you're responsible. That's insane, Vanessa whispered. He'll come after you? Russell finished. Yes, I expect he will. Unless what? Unless you help me complete his destruction. Russell outlined his proposition. Vanessa would return to Keller, claiming she'd met with Russell only to try to extract information about his legal strategy. She would become Russell's eyes and ears, feeding him information while subtly encouraging Keller's growing paranoia. Why would I do this? Vanessa asked, her voice shaking. If Tony is as dangerous as you say. Because it's your only option, Russell said simply. The FBI has enough evidence to charge you both with multiple federal crimes. I'm the only thing standing between you and a lengthy prison sentence. You wouldn't, she challenged, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Russell slid another folder across the table. Wouldn't I? This contains every piece of evidence linking you directly to the counterfeiting operation. One call from me, and a U.S. attorney gets a copy. Vanessa stared at him, seeing a side of her husband she'd never encountered before, calculated, ruthless, and completely unmoved by her tears. What about Dorothy? She asked finally. Your mother is already cooperating, Russell replied. She made her deal 2 days ago. This was a lie. Russell hadn't contacted Dorothy at all, but the shock and betrayal on Vanessa's face told him she believed it. The seed of doubt had been planted. Now mother and daughter would distrust each other as well. I need time to think, Vanessa said. You have until tomorrow morning, Russell replied, standing to indicate the meeting was over. 10 a.m. Yes or no? After that, I call the FBI. After Vanessa left, Boyd emerged from the bedroom where he'd been monitoring the conversation. She'll run straight to Keller, he predicted. Of course she will, Russell agreed. And she'll tell him exactly what I want him to hear, that I'm gathering evidence against him, that I have connections in federal law enforcement, that I'm coming for him. You're using your wife as bait, Boyd observed, not judgmentally, but with professional assessment. She made herself bait when she decided to betray me, Russell replied. I'm just ensuring she serves a purpose. That evening, Russell met with Philip to discuss the legal aspects of his plan. The attorney was concerned. What you're doing borders on witness tampering and obstruction of justice, Philip warned. Not to mention the potential for getting Vanessa seriously hurt. I'm not forcing her to do anything, Russell countered. She has choices. Bad ones, admittedly, but choices nonetheless. Philip sighed. And what's your endgame here? What happens when Keller realizes he's being set up? Russell's expression was chillingly calm. Then he'll do exactly what cornered rats always do. Something desperate and stupid. And when he does, I'll be waiting. The next morning, precisely at 10 a.m., Vanessa texted Russell. I'll do it. But I want immunity in writing. Russell smiled as he typed his response. Meet me at Philip's office at noon. Come alone. If Keller follows you, the deal is off. Everything was falling into place. The trap was set. Now all Russell had to do was wait for his targets to spring at themselves. Chapter 7. Checkmate in motion. The chess pieces were moving exactly as Russell had anticipated. Vanessa, torn between fear of Keller and fear of prosecution, became his reluctant informant. Dorothy, isolated and suspicious after Russell's lie about her cooperation, retreated to a friend's house in Wellesley. And Keller, feeling the walls closing in, grew increasingly erratic. Russell maintained his command center at the Archer, monitoring developments through Boyd's surveillance team and Diana's financial tracking. The hard acquisition proceeded on schedule despite Meridian Biotech's desperate attempts to derail it. Russell attended board meetings and client presentations as if nothing in his personal life had imploded, projecting an aura of unflappable control that unnerved even his closest colleagues. The SEC has opened an investigation into Keller's trading activity, Philip reported, joining Russell for their daily briefing. Anonymous tips about his Meridian connections have caught their attention. Russell nodded, satisfied. And the Lux verified situation? The new CEO you installed has been reviewing their authentication procedures, Boyd explained. Found shocking irregularities that necessitated contacting all their retail clients. Keller's been trying to get through to him for days, but mysteriously, his calls aren't being returned. The new CEO was Russell's former head of operations, a loyal employee who understood exactly what Russell wanted, a controlled implosion that would destroy Keller's credibility without bringing down the entire business. Vanessa reports that Keller's becoming unhinged. Boyd continued, checking his notes. Drinking heavily, lashing out. He's convinced someone's targeting him specifically, but can't figure out who. Has he threatened her? Russell asked, his tone clinically detached. Boyd hesitated. She says no, but the surveillance tells a different story. He grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises during their last meeting. Good, Russell said coldly. Document everything. We'll need it later. Philip exchanged concerned glances with Boyd. Russell, I understand your anger, but using your wife as a punching bag for Keller crosses a line. She crossed the line first, Russell replied without emotion. Besides, I'm not forcing her to stay with him. She's making that choice because she thinks it's her best option. And what happens when Keller snaps completely? Philip pressed. He has connections to violent criminals. This could escalate beyond your control. Russell smiled thinly. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The next phase of Russell's plan targeted the fragile alliance between Keller and the Vitali family. Using information obtained from Vanessa, Russell identified a warehouse in South Boston where a major shipment of counterfeit goods was being stored. Through an untraceable burner phone, he contacted Ricardo Vitali. Warehouse 17 on Dorchester Avenue. Tonight, Keller's moving the merchandise without your knowledge, bringing in his own people. Within hours, surveillance showed Vitali family soldiers converging on the warehouse. The resulting confrontation with Keller's men escalated into violence that required police intervention. 3 arrests were made, none of them Vitali associates, who had vanished before authorities arrived. Russell watched the news coverage with satisfaction. The incident would be the final nail in Keller's relationship with the Vitali family, who prized discretion above all. The following day, Vanessa called Russell in a panic. Tony knows, she said, her voice trembling. He knows I've been feeding you information. He found the burner phone you gave me. Where are you now? Russell asked calmly. In the bathroom at his condo. He's in the other room, talking to someone on the phone. Russell, he's saying he's going to make an example of me. I think he's going to hurt me. Stay calm, Russell instructed. Is there a window in the bathroom? Yes, but it's small and we're on the 5th floor. Lock the door. Tell him you're taking a shower. Then text me his exact address. I'll have someone there in 10 minutes. After hanging up, Russell turned to Boyd. Send Martinez to extract her. Then leak Keller's address to Detective Cooper. Anonymous tip about counterfeit goods. Boyd frowned. You're saving her? I'm ensuring she remains useful, Russell corrected, and creating the perfect opportunity to deliver Keller to the authorities. 30 minutes later, Boyd received confirmation that Martinez had successfully extracted Vanessa through the bathroom window using equipment from his former SWAT days. She was being brought to a safe house, shaken but unharmed. Meanwhile, Boston PD was surrounding Keller's building based on the anonymous tip. The timing couldn't have been better. Keller's rage at Vanessa's betrayal had led him to pull out his entire inventory of counterfeit samples and authentication materials, which were spread across his dining room table when police knocked on his door. Russell watched the feed from a traffic camera across from Keller's building, satisfaction coursing through him as he saw Keller being led out in handcuffs. Now what? Philip asked. Now we move to the final phase, Russell replied, ensuring none of them ever recover from this. When Vanessa arrived at the safe house, Russell was waiting. She looked terrible, makeup smeared, hair disheveled, a bruise forming on her cheek where Keller had struck her. You set me up, she accused, her voice hoarse from crying. You knew he'd figure it out. I anticipated it as a possibility, Russell acknowledged without remorse. But you're alive, and Keller is in custody. That's what matters. What matters? Vanessa laughed bitterly. My life is destroyed. I could go to prison. I have nothing left. That's not entirely true, Russell said, sliding a document across the table. This is a one-way ticket to Barcelona, a new passport in the name of Victoria Peters, and access to an account with enough money to start over. The account will be funded after you sign these papers. The papers were divorce documents, devastatingly one-sided. Vanessa would relinquish all claims to Russell's assets and business interests. She would admit to the counterfeiting operation and her affair in writing. She would agree never to contact Russell again or to return to the United States. This is blackmail, she whispered. This is mercy, Russell corrected. You could be facing federal charges carrying up to 20 years. Instead, you get a new life far away from here. All you have to do is sign. Vanessa stared at the documents, then at her husband, this cold stranger who had once loved her. Was any of it real? She asked quietly. Us, I mean. For a moment, something flickered in Russell's eyes, a ghost of the man he'd been before her betrayal. Then it vanished, replaced by implacable resolve. It doesn't matter now, he said. Sign the papers, Vanessa. It's your only way out. With a shaking hand, she signed each page. When she finished, Russell collected the documents without another word and walked to the door. Russell, she called after him. Will I ever see you again? He paused, his back to her. If you do, it means you've broken our agreement. And trust me, Vanessa, you don't want to find out what happens then. The door closed behind him with quiet finality. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Anthony Keller sat in an interrogation room at Boston Police Headquarters, his designer's suit rumpled, his confident facade cracking. Across from him, Detective Cooper reviewed the evidence gathered from Keller's condo, samples of counterfeit goods, authentication materials, and financial records linking him to the distribution network. You're looking at multiple federal charges, Cooper explained. Trademark counterfeiting, conspiracy, interstate transport of stolen property. The U.S. Attorney's Office is talking about a 15-year minimum sentence. Keller leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. Look, I can give you bigger fish. The Vitale family's entire operation. Names, dates, everything. We're listening, Cooper said, though his expression suggested skepticism. First, I want a deal in writing. Reduced charges, witness protection. Cooper nodded to his partner, who left the room, presumably to consult with prosecutors. In reality, he wanted to make a call that would ensure word of Keller's offer reached Ricardo Vitale within the hour. Across town, Russell met with the board of Lux Verified, now fully under his control. The company's legitimate business, authenticating luxury goods, would continue under new management with enhanced procedures. The counterfeiting operation had been surgically excised, with all evidence pointing solely to Keller. The company's reputation will take a hit initially, Russell acknowledged to the board members, all recently installed allies. But we'll position it as a necessary cleansing after discovering Keller's deception. Within 6 months, Lux will be the gold standard for authentication because we'll have proven our commitment to integrity. As Russell left the meeting, Boyd called with an update. Keller's trying to flip on the Vitales. Word's already spreading in their organization. Perfect, Russell replied. And Dorothy? Still at her friend's house in Wellesley. She's been calling Vanessa nonstop since yesterday, but obviously getting no response. It's time to bring her in, Russell decided. Have Martinez pick her up. Use whatever story works. Dorothy Perkins arrived at the safe house 2 hours later, escorted by Martinez, who had convinced her that Vanessa was in trouble and needed her mother. Instead, she found Russell waiting in a sparsely furnished living room. Where's Vanessa? She demanded, her imperious manner intact despite the circumstances. Gone, Russell replied simply. And if she's smart, she won't come back. Dorothy's face paled. What have you done? What have I done? Russell laughed without humor. That's rich coming from the woman who helped set me up to take the fall for a federal crime. It wasn't my idea, Dorothy protested quickly. Tony Keller approached me after my investment troubles. He said it would be easy money, just using the home office when you weren't around. Then it escalated to framing me for everything while your daughter slept with him. Russell finished coldly. Yes, I'm aware of how it escalated. Dorothy sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 67 years. What happens now? Are you going to turn me in? Russell studied his mother-in-law, this woman who had looked down on him from the moment they met, who had never thought him good enough for her daughter despite his success and generosity. That depends entirely on you, Dorothy, he said finally. I'm prepared to offer you the same deal Vanessa took, a new identity, enough money to live comfortably far away from here, in exchange for signing some papers and disappearing permanently. And if I refuse? Russell slid a folder across the coffee table. Then these documents go to the FBI. They detail your involvement from the beginning, including your prior knowledge of the counterfeiting operation, your introduction of Keller to Vanessa, and your role in planning to frame me. Dorothy opened the folder with trembling hands. These are lies, she whispered, though her eyes betrayed her. Are they? Russell raised an eyebrow. Vanessa has already provided a sworn statement implicating you as the mastermind. It's her word against yours. Who do you think they'll believe? The daughter who fled the country, or the mother who stayed behind to collect the spoils? It was another lie. Vanessa had signed no such statement, but Dorothy had no way of knowing that. The seed of betrayal Russell had planted earlier bloomed into full certainty in Dorothy's mind. Her own daughter had sacrificed her to save herself. You're a monster, Dorothy said, but there was no conviction in her voice. I'm a survivor, Russell corrected. Something you taught me to be, ironically enough. Now, do we have a deal? The next day, Dorothy boarded a flight to Amsterdam with a new passport in the name of Elizabeth Reynolds. The lakeside cottage she'd always dreamed of owning would be waiting for her, comfortable but modest, far from the luxury she'd once known. She would never see her daughter again. Meanwhile, Anthony Keller's situation deteriorated rapidly. His attempt to trade information on the Vitali family earned him protective custody, but also a target on his back. 2 guards at the holding facility were on Ricardo Vitali's payroll, and word of Keller's cooperation spread quickly through the criminal underworld. Prosecutors, eager to build a case against the Vitali organization, moved Keller to a secure location to finalize his cooperation agreement. The transport van never arrived at its destination. It was found abandoned on a service road, the 2 U.S. Marshals unconscious from drugged coffee, Keller nowhere to be found. 3 days later, Keller's body washed up on the shores of Boston Harbor, bearing the hallmarks of a thorough interrogation before death. The message was clear to anyone else who might consider betraying the Vitali family. Russell received the news with quiet satisfaction. Everything had unfolded according to his design. Keller had been eliminated by the very criminals he'd partnered with. Vanessa and Dorothy were exiled, never to return. The Hart acquisition had closed successfully, generating millions in fees for Russell's firm. And Lux Verified, now under his control, was being repositioned as an industry leader in authenticating luxury goods. As Russell sat in his office reviewing the final reports, Philip entered with a concerned expression. It's over, Russell, he said quietly. You've won. Completely and utterly. Yes, Russell agreed, his face betraying no emotion. Justice has been served. Philip sat across from him. Has it? Or is this just revenge? Is there a difference? Russell asked mildly. I think you know there is, Philip replied. Justice restores. Revenge destroys. And I'm worried about what this has done to you. Russell considered this. They try to take everything from me, Philip, my freedom, my reputation, my company. They would have watched me go to prison without a moment's remorse. And now they've lost everything instead, Philip acknowledged. But at what cost to you? The Russell I knew before this. He was tough, yes, even ruthless in business. But there was a line he wouldn't cross. That Russell died the day his wife pointed at him and said, "He made me do it," Russell replied coldly. This is who I am now. Someone who ensures his enemies don't get second chances. Philip sighed, recognizing the futility of his concern. What will you do now? Rebuild, Russell said simply. On my terms, without distractions or vulnerabilities. As Philip left, Russell turned to the window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. He felt neither triumph nor regret, only a cold certainty that he had done what was necessary. The world had shown him its true nature, and he had adapted accordingly. Never again would he allow himself to be vulnerable. Never again would he trust without verification. And never, ever would he forgive those who betrayed him. The Russell Norwood who had believed in second chances was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the ultimate lesson. Mercy was a luxury reserved for the weak, and he had no intention of ever being weak again. Chapter 9. Ashes to Ashes. 6 months passed. Boston's brutal winter had given way to spring, but Russell Norwood remained cold as ice. His business flourished. The hard acquisition had positioned his firm as a major player in pharmaceutical mergers, attracting new clients eager to benefit from his ruthless efficiency. Lux Verified had been successfully rebranded as the industry's most rigorous authentication service, its connection to the counterfeiting scandal minimized to a footnote about previous management. Russell had sold the colonial home where he had lived with Vanessa, unwilling to remain in a space tainted by betrayal. His new penthouse in a downtown high-rise offered panoramic views of the city and absolute privacy. The interior was minimalist, almost austere. No photographs, no mementos, nothing personal. It was less a home than a fortress. On a warm May evening, Russell sat on his balcony reviewing quarterly projections when his private line rang. Only 5 people had this number, and none called without good reason. Norwood, he answered. It's Boyd. We have a situation. Vanessa's back in Boston. Russell's expression didn't change, but his grip on the phone tightened. Explain. She flew in yesterday under her Victoria Peters identity. She's staying at the Mandarin Oriental. From what we can gather, she's nearly out of money. That's impossible, Russell said coldly. The account I set up had enough to last years if managed properly. Apparently, she wasn't careful. Also, she's not alone. She has a child with her. A boy, approximately 4 months old. Russell closed his eyes briefly, processing this information. Monitor her movements. No contact. I'll handle this personally. He hung up and walked to his desk, opening a drawer that contained a single file, the complete dossier on Vanessa's new identity. Every detail of her exile had been meticulously planned, including the establishment of an offshore account that would provide a comfortable living in Barcelona. If she had exhausted those funds in just 6 months, she had been catastrophically irresponsible. The child complicated matters. Given the timing, it could only be Keller's. Russell felt no emotional response to this revelation, just another variable to be managed. The next morning, Russell had Boyd book him a suite at the Mandarin Oriental, 2 floors above Vanessa's room. He checked in under a false name and waited for Boyd's team to report on her routine. According to their surveillance, she left the hotel every morning, visiting various financial institutions and law offices, returning frustrated each time. On the 3rd day, Russell decided it was time. He had Boyd call Vanessa's room, impersonating the hotel manager, requesting she come to the main restaurant to discuss an issue with her bill. When she arrived, she would find Russell waiting instead. Vanessa appeared exactly at the arranged time, the baby carrier in her hand. She looked thinner than Russell remembered, her once immaculate appearance now showing signs of strain. The confident socialite had been replaced by a woman clearly struggling to maintain appearances. She froze when she saw him, her face draining of color. "Hello, Vanessa," Russell said calmly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please sit down. We have matters to discuss." After a moment's hesitation, she sat, placing the carrier beside her. Inside, the baby slept peacefully, unaware of the tension surrounding him. "You broke our agreement," Russell began without preamble. "The terms were explicit. You were never to return to the United States." "I had no choice," Vanessa replied, her voice low. "The money's gone. The account was emptied 3 months ago." Russell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Impossible. I set up that account myself. No one could access it but you." "Someone did," Vanessa insisted. "I woke up one morning and it was empty. Every penny gone. I tried to contact the bank, but suddenly my documentation wasn't valid anymore. It was like Victoria Peters never existed." Russell studied her carefully, looking for signs of deception. Finding none, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Diana, instructing her to investigate the account immediately. "Even if what you're saying is true," Russell continued, "returning here violated our agreement. You know the consequences. Vanessa's eyes flashed with a spark of her old defiance. What are you going to do, Russell? Turn me in? You'd be implicating yourself. Don't test me, Vanessa. I promise there will be consequences if you returned. And there will be. She leaned forward. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I've lost everything already. My home, my mother, my identity. The only thing I have left is my son, and I will do anything to protect him. The baby stirred in his carrier, making small whimpering sounds. Vanessa automatically reached to rock him, her maternal instincts momentarily superseding the confrontation. Keller's child, Russell observed dispassionately. His name is Michael, Vanessa said, a protective edge at her voice. And yes, biologically Tony is his father, but Tony never knew about him. I found out I was pregnant after I left the country. Russell's phone vibrated with a message from Diana. Account emptied 3 months ago. Professional job. Traced to operation in Russia. More details coming. It seems you're telling the truth about the money, Russell acknowledged. The question is, what do we do now? I need help. Russell, Vanessa admitted, swallowing her pride. Just enough to start over somewhere. Not Barcelona, obviously. Somewhere I can raise Michael safely. Russell considered her request, weighing variables dispassionately. And why should I help you? After everything you did? Because despite what you've become, I don't believe you want an innocent child to suffer for his parents' mistakes. The baby was fully awake now, looking around with curious eyes. Russell found himself meeting that innocent gaze, seeing neither Vanessa nor Keller, but simply a child untainted by their crimes. After a long moment, Russell reached a decision. I'll establish a trust for the child, administered by a third party, accessible only for his education and essential needs. You will receive a modest stipend as his guardian, contingent on you remaining at least 3,000 miles from Boston. That's it, Vanessa asked, incredulous. I'm supposed to live on a modest stipend while raising a child alone? You're supposed to be grateful you're not in federal prison, Russell countered coldly. This arrangement is for the child's benefit, not yours. If you refuse, I'll walk away, and you can explain to the FBI why you're back in the country with fraudulent identification. Vanessa stared at him, searching for any hint of the man she had married. Finding none, she nodded slowly. You really meant it, didn't you? What you said that day at the safe house. You'll never forgive me. Forgiveness implies I still care enough to resent you, Russell replied. I don't. You're simply a loose end that needs tying up. As they finalized the details of the arrangement, Russell maintained his detached demeanor. The trust would be established immediately, with the first payments available within 48 hours. Enough time for Vanessa to be on a plane far away from Boston. When everything was settled, Vanessa gathered her things to leave, then paused. You know what the saddest part is, Russell? I really did love you once. Before Tony, before all of it. I wish you could believe that. Russell met her gaze with empty eyes. What you believe you felt is irrelevant. Actions define truth, not sentiments. Your actions spoke clearly. Vanessa nodded sadly. So do yours. She lifted the baby carrier. Goodbye, Russell. I hope someday you find whatever it is you're looking for. I'm not looking for anything, he replied. I've already found what matters, absolute self-reliance. After she left, Russell remained at the table, gazing out at the Boston skyline. He felt no triumph, no closure, no satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that another potential threat had been neutralized. That evening, Russell sat alone in his penthouse, reviewing the final details of Vanessa's departure. She would be on a flight to Seattle the next morning, with connections to the trust already established. The child would be provided for, and Vanessa would be kept on a tight enough leash to ensure her compliance. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Few people knew his address, and none would visit unannounced. Cautiously, he checked the security camera to find Philip standing in the hallway. This is unexpected, Russell said as he opened the door. Philip entered, glancing around at the Spartan interior. Nice place. Very efficient. Why are you here, Philip? The attorney set his briefcase on the counter. Boyd told me about Vanessa. I wanted to make sure you were handling it appropriately. The situation is resolved, Russell replied flatly. She'll be gone by morning. Philip studied his client, concern evident in his expression. You know, when this all started, I understood your anger. The betrayal, the setup, anyone would want revenge. But it's been 6 months, Russell. You've won. Completely. Yet you're still what? Russell challenged. Still at war. Philip finished. Except there's no one left to fight. Russell turned away. I'm not interested in amateur psychology. Philip, it's not psychology, it's concern. I've known you for 15 years. The man standing in front of me now is just a shell of who you were. The man I was weak, Russell said dismissively. He trusted blindly. He believed in loyalty and love. Look where that got him. It got him a life, Philip countered. This, he gestured around the empty apartment. This isn't living, Russell. It's surviving. Surviving is underrated, Russell replied coldly. It means you haven't been defeated. Philip sighed, recognizing the futility of his concern. The papers for Vanessa's trust are in my briefcase. I'll need your signature. As Russell signed the documents, Philip made one last attempt. You know, that child, Michael, he's innocent in all this. Maybe someday. He's Keller's son, Russell interrupted. Nothing more, nothing less. I've ensured he'll be provided for. My obligation ends there. After Philip left, Russell stood on his balcony, watching night settle over Boston. In 6 short months, he had systematically dismantled one life and constructed another. His business was thriving. His enemies were destroyed or exiled. He had emerged victorious from a war few even knew had been fought. Yet standing in his fortress high above the city, Russell Norwood felt neither triumph nor peace. The man who had once believed in connection, in trust, in the possibility of happiness had been burned away, leaving only ashes where his heart had been. And in those ashes, a new truth had crystallized, a truth as cold and hard as diamond. In this world, you could have power or vulnerability, strength or sentiment, control or connection, but never both. Russell had made his choice, and he would never look back. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.